Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LogiSYM webinars. My name is Joe Lombardo. I'm the editor of the LogiSYM magazine. And today, I'm pleased to welcome our guest, Frederic Gomer. He's the co-founder and managing partner of B2G Consulting, an international consulting firm engaged in the supply chain transformation in emerging and challenging markets. Frederic has very wide experience in the industry, and I welcome Frederic to our webinar because he will bring a fresh insight into our industry. And as we start, I would like to welcome Frederic. Frederic, welcome to LogiSYM webinar. And if you would just maybe give a short introduction of yourself before we go into the more detailed substance of our webinar.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, Joe, today. I'm very pleased for being on the webinar of LogiSYM. So just to introduce myself, I'm Frederic Gomer, one of the partners of B2G Consulting. So I would say I started my career 20 years ago. So I don't want to sound like an old dude, but this is what it is. And I was mainly working on the industrial improvement area, supporting manufacturing organizations to improve their productivity, throughput, for example. And I had the opportunity to work on a warehouse, fully automated warehouse project, which I would say was the first step for me into the supply chain area. And from that, I moved from the purely warehouse activity to transport, from transport to generally speaking, distribution, then sourcing, procurement, planning, etc. So I would say I'm quite passionate about supply chain, although it was not, I was not meant, I think, to join this domain originally.
Excellent, excellent. And I know you come from Grenoble as well, right, Frederic? You studied in the Polygon area, where the heart and industrial part of France is. In fact, I know Grenoble quite well. I used to travel there a lot. I worked with ST Micro. So.
Yes, Grenoble is a very nice area. It's very mountainous and a very interesting engineering school there. So this is where I did my studies, where I learned the being industrial engineer, basically. And that was my, I would say, the first step. So I don't know how many people know Grenoble in France, but that's quite a mid-sized city, which is quite interesting. And yeah, you should go and visit whenever we will be able to travel again.
Exactly. Excellent. Okay, Frederic, so you just outlined very simply now what the supply chain perimeter is. And as you mentioned, is the planning, demand management, logistics, warehousing, and a huge amount of activities in the industrial domain. But tell us a bit about what you are working on in terms of supply chain transformation, because supply chain transformation is a word now that is used very frequently. It means different things to different people. In your context, what does it mean, and how are you developing this new model or concept?
Yeah, there's for me a very simple definition. You will find a company who is doing some activities, being positioned somewhere. They are delivering some products, manufacturing some products, and they realize that they are not in line with the demand, with the market. They are not in line with the offering, and are not aligned with the competition, what the competitive landscape is offering, and they want to adjust or to change their business model, which may mean different things to different companies.
Sure.
But transformation, basically, it's how you can move from where you are currently, doing a certain number of activities, reaching some level of performance, and where you want to be. And where you want to be is usually quite different from your current state. And there's a lot of effort, a lot of change management involved to move from the current state to the future state. And that's what is transforming the business transformation or the supply chain transformation. But it really depends on where the company would like to be and what they want to achieve as a company, and what is their value proposition to their customers.
Sure. Clearly, we are all hearing the new this 4.0, and some people think this is just AI, or is just internet or machine learning, or some form of automation. But as we know, it's a much deeper concept than just an upgrade from 3.0. And the transformation is really about technology. How do you balance in your work in the transformation between technology, but also the enablers in the organization to execute and realize this change, this transformation?
Yes, usually companies are quite rushing into the technology, finding new tools, new systems, automating a lot of their current activities, which is not exactly a digital transformation. And what we usually do when we start to engage with the client is to stop whatever ongoing project that they have on the digital aspects. We tell them first, you need to define, as you rightfully mentioned previously, what is your value proposition, what you want to achieve as a to-be state. And based on that, we can define how the technology can support the change. And the technology can't be the change itself. It has to support, it's an enabler. It's only an enabler. So there's a lot of confusion going on between the digital transformation and the business transformation. And sometimes it's, it takes a lot of time to explain to companies that they have to think first in terms of business processes, what they want to achieve, their positioning, their offering, how they want to be structured, organized in terms of people. And then the last part is how can they do it faster in a more efficient way. And this is where technology comes into the picture, not before.
Right. So basically you're saying, put the technology aside, go back to the basics, align the business model, align the business thinking, align the current structure, the current systems, and then leverage on the technology to achieve the enhancement and the growth of the transformation. Did I get you correctly?
Exactly. And the opportunity that we have currently in 2020 is there are plenty of systems, tools, technology out there available off the shelves that can support any transformation. So we are not lacking of technological support or tools. What is lacking is the value proposition, the business model to be defined. And then the tools are quite easily available in the market, but provided that you know what you want to achieve. It can be a race of having a new tech, AI, blockchain, to automate everything. It's not the purpose. It would be a waste of time and effort, and of course investment also.
So the steps that you described seem very logical. It's very clear, very structured, but clearly it's very challenging. What are the challenges that you are facing in the mindset of organizations in adapting to the new changes, the new technology, the new way of working that you are describing, and how do you overcome this first obstacle in the transformational journey?
The first, and that's a very important question. Thanks, Joe, for asking. I think the first wall that we hit when we want to conduct or to lead a supply chain transformation is the culture. The cultural aspect is extremely strong. So the first thing that we need to do is to understand the culture. You can't change the level of centralization or decentralization of a company just like that. We work, for example, for a Swiss company. They are extremely decentralized, like the country, with canton and different regions. And that's the mindset of the company. So you can't come and say we're going to centralize everything have a central governance and it will be fine. It won't work because it's against the culture. So the first thing that we do, we analyze, understand the culture. We call it the culture decoding. So we decode the culture to understand the evils, the heroes, the habits, etc., etc. And once we have a clear understanding of that, and we conduct some surveys to the internally, we then work with the culture to shift the culture, not to fight the culture. And that's extremely important because if you want to fight the culture, you will always lose. It's a lose-lose game. Yeah. So the key point here is to understand how you can shift the culture. In some cases, we work for companies, leading companies in the cosmetics industry, and there's no burning platform culture. You can't come and say the roof is on fire, let's do this, let's turn that. It doesn't work. But what works well for them is to mention the fact that they won't be able to be the first one, to be the leader in some aspects. And this is good enough for them to move to the desired state. So that's very important to first tackle the cultural aspect.
Right. Yeah, business culture is a very important ingredient to any company success, and also even more important, transformation. Business culture is sometimes misunderstood. It's understood maybe as a country culture, ethnic culture. And I think we need to explore what changes culture. I believe one of the things that is very important is behavior. Behavior forms the culture. The buy-in is part of the culture, is the mindset is part of the culture. How do you address these different facets of this cultural change, this adaptation moving forward?
We have a model called the culture onion. So for the culture onion, we have different layers, as you mentioned, which is composed of the behavior, of the ethics, of some of the habits, how people greet each other. That's a fact. How people are being recognized, how people are promoted or demoted. Who are the evils, who are the heroes, and these define the culture. So there are different layers, and based on those different layers, which is very specific to each organization, you can have two organizations in the same industry doing most probably the same business. If you look at Apple and Microsoft, for example, but in the end, you will see complete different mindset, complete different culture, and this is again part of this onion culture analysis, where you can understand all the components, all the ingredients of the culture.
I like your onion analogy. You being French, and onion being one of the culinary cultures of France. It's a good analogy, a good combination. Yeah. Do you talk about the different cultures? Do you see the challenges within Asia, for example, where the different cultures in different developed countries or the different industries within Asia is a barrier, or is an obstacle, is a motivational element? How do you balance all these cultures? Because at the end of the day, you've got to say, we have to appreciate, we have to motivate, we have to incentivize, we have to encourage, we have to use a little bit of the Kaizen, if you like, theories and methodologies. But at the end of the day, how do you then link your technology transformation with the people buy-in and moving forward?
Yeah, so the buying is, we have usually, when we structure a transformation program, we define different work streams where we'll have specific topics, technical supply chain topics like distribution network, for example, planning, etc. And we have two very important topics that we tackle as a work stream by themselves. Right. One is change management, leadership development, right, where we tackle all the cultural aspects, also understanding how managers are leading their teams, and that's very important. We understood doing supply chain optimization projects that you can reach a certain level of performance by changing the processes, by changing the tools, the systems, but we will reach a plateau if we don't work on the managerial behavior on the managers. And usually you can have, it would be a bit funny here, but you can have a bad strategy as long as you have the right team, the right managers, then you can sort it out, and that's very important. Yeah. So we tackle those aspects specifically, and we have integrated in our teams leadership development coaches specifically. Which are not supply chain specialists, but that's very important for us to look at those aspects. And back to your question with Asia, that's very interesting because Asia, culturally speaking, doesn't mean much for us, because if you look at the culture in Japan, in Thailand, in Singapore or Hong Kong, I'm not even talking about Vietnam and Korea, the culture is very different. Right. And if you compare, let's say, the group of Asia versus Europe, in Asia, you have to find, I would say, tricks or ways to engage people, to make sure that they express themselves. They're not afraid to express their views, their opinions, if they have ideas. So we need to create some safe environment to make sure that we capture, we get their inputs, where usually in Asia, would say the staff will expect the manager to tell them what to do, because the manager is supposed to know what needs to be done. In Europe, it's very common to challenge your boss, to disagree, to confront, especially in the French culture. Confrontation. You confront first people, and then you can then agree on what the other person is saying. So the cultures are very different, and quite funnily, even when you look at, let's say, in Thailand or in France, two companies, there will be the country culture, but you will also have different cultures between different organizations. And that's very important also to understand those differences.
Yeah. A transformation program is quite a delicate process. It's quite a delicate journey. It can create some fragility in the organization, some imbalances, etc. And these are part of the change management, as you described. But now we have COVID-19, and everything is blown out of the water. Everything seems to be a complete new dynamic, a new scenario, which no one knows where this is going. What is your view now for companies who are engaged in a transformation journey? What will this COVID-19 do to the journey? But also, how can they recover from a situation where they're going through a change, a transition, maybe putting at risk some of the elements they're working on, maybe creating change in the resilience, in the effectiveness, etc. Where do we see now companies in the journey surviving this COVID-19 crisis?
Yes, most companies we came across, what they naturally did was to pause any projects, any major transformation projects. They just paused it. They didn't cancel it. They may have postponed most of the activities to focus on the short term, on the priorities. The key issue that COVID-19 has imposed was how can those companies deliver products to their customers? How can they find some additional capacity on their distribution centers, on other aspects, whether there's a supplier which is failing, or a manufacturing plant which is not able to deliver because there's a country lockdown. So we have been as consultants being put on pause. So we try to push a little bit on those transformation projects, but we understood that was clearly not the priority. The priority was to the short term, which is which is important, which was important, and which is
Sure.
still important in some cases for some
Sure.
companies. That's the first aspect. Second aspect is the how companies will integrate COVID-19 into the way they are managing their supply chain. And that's, I think, a very important point. Some will, I mean, the minimum would be just to cover the holes that COVID-19 has highlighted, which would be the agility or the lack of agility in this case. Because if you have a drop of your demand by 30 or 40% or more, you need to be agile enough to reconfigure quickly your supply chain. Same on the other side, if you have a spike in the demand, how can you manage it? Or if your capacity, your supply capacity has been significantly reduced, you have to deliver maybe a demand which has been also decreased, but with limited capacity. And that's a big challenge. And most companies, I think, up to now, whether they had a contingency program, they did not stress test their supply chain in real life, which means that they had a virtual theoretical plan that they never tested. And now that's a real life test that they have.
It's clear that disruption has changed all the priorities. Clearly, the priorities of revenue generation, revenue creation is a survival factor. But don't you think that companies who have engaged in a transformation program, who now say, I put it on hold, risk to reverse all the work that you've done in the transformation journey and revert back to what they've been doing and basically unwind all the work in moving forward? Because they say, I'm moving forward into an unknown territory. I need to go back and work on something I'm sure of. And therefore, that completely negates all the work that's been done so far. Do you see this as a major issue?
It is, and the challenge, I would say, regardless of COVID-19, in some cases, you may have a new management board, for example, new directions. The key challenge for any transformation is, first, it's long. It takes time. It takes years. Usually, the minimum would be 18 to 24 months as a minimum for some initial phases. And you have to maintain the momentum. And that's the key challenge. And once you break the momentum, it is extremely hard to start over.
Right. Okay. It's very challenging to think what go forward, how to go forward. But just in sort of concluding remarks now, Frederic, as I alluded to the beginning of the discussion, is what happens after COVID-19? What is the new normal going to look like? I mean, in the last few years, and you know, because you've been around a long time, our main focus in the supply chain is to be agile, lean, asset light, outsourcing, and all the innovative way of working supply chain. Are those now out of the window? Do we start from scratch again? Maybe we're too lean. Maybe we're outsourcing too much. Maybe we're too asset light. What will be, in your mind, the new norm of the future?
I think there would be, and that's a very interesting question, there would be several norms. And if I have to summarize it into one statement, companies will have to define different models. When you are in the US, in North America, in Europe, for example, those markets are extremely mature in terms of the demand. So what you tend to do as a supply chain manager is to be extremely lean, to make sure that your supply chain can be efficient as much as possible. And this is where you would put in place a concept such as just in time. You will reduce or optimize your inventory as much as possible because the market is mature, the suppliers are mature, the demand is mature, and it's extremely easy to forecast. Put easy into bracket to forecast the demand. We are talking about toilet papers, and that's a good example. For the toilet papers, there's nothing more easy to forecast than toilet paper in Europe or in France, for example, or in North America. But when you have a spike in the demand because of a crisis like COVID-19, then the demand becomes erratic. And you can't really manage the supply chain in an efficient way with very limited inventory, with just-in-time concept. And you need to shift quite quickly. Once you detect that the demand has changed in terms of patterns, you need to shift into a different model. And that's what most companies are struggling to understand. One model is fine when you are in a consistent, stable, mature market. But whenever there's a change, you can't use the same model.
Sure.
So you may have, as an international global company, you may have a model for mature markets, another model for emerging markets, and global companies know that very well. In emerging markets, the demand is very erratic. It's difficult to understand the customer behaviors in terms of the buying patterns. So they build a lot of inventories, etc. Quite the opposite of what you would do in a mature market. The key here is to have different models to make sure that you're able to shift whenever the conditions are changing, whether it's because of a crisis such as COVID-19, or it could be a failure from a supplier or a customer, or any situations, crisis situation that the company may face.
The multimodal approach seems to be the logical one, but that also will then open new challenges in terms of the competencies in the company to understand and integrate the models, the tools and systems to drive those different models, and then the integration of how do you actually translate those models into the execution in your manufacturing machine or your outsourcing machine, etc. So those are all big questions that maybe we should fix an appointment to discuss that down the road, maybe in 1 to 2 months' time. So Frederic, I can see that we have a lot we can talk about, but time is running out. Now, people listening to this webinar will be interested in what you're doing in your company. So how could people contact you? Because I hope that you will have interesting people calling you, and I will call you for one and have a discussion offline as well. But how can people contact you? You want to leave a message?
Yes, you can just contact me on my email address. So Frederic with a C .Gomer, Gomer at B2G-consulting.com. Or you can visit our website also, B2G-consulting.com.
Right, excellent.
And I'll be pleased to answer you.
Yeah, no. So are you busy at the moment? Are you on lockdown as well? Are you, because obviously your clients are now saying, Frederic, please leave me alone. I need to survive. So how are you spending your time?
Yes, so I'm on a personal level, I'm baking a lot now, being at home. And on the other side, we are also supporting clients on the COVID-19. So we did a few things which are quite interesting. First, we design an approach to manage the crisis. Right. So that's one. And I don't know if I can share some slides on online. Let me see. Maybe yes.
It could be difficult.
Okay. So then let's leave it.
We can't. Yeah.
And the second aspect also, we launch an interactive free platform online on our website, where you can have a global map of the different transportation lanes, air freight, sea freight, road freight, real time in terms of their status, in terms of capacity also between countries to countries. So that's
repeat again your website again, because I think it's very interesting thing. So it's B2G Consulting.com, is it right?
B2G-consulting.com.
Perfect. So you never know, we might see a Gomer Bistro in Orchard Road sometime, if you have a new
maybe soon.
Maybe soon.
I'm looking at doing some delivery.
Good time.
Perfect.
Okay, this is a new supply chain.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Frederic, listen, Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Time has been short, but it's been very focused and very interesting to hear your take on what's happening in the industry. Of course, there are many questions still to be asked and to be answered. And maybe down the road, we can share some better views of where we are going and how we see this developing. Thank you very much, Frederic.
Thanks a lot, Joe. See you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Stay well and take care.
Thanks. You too. See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.